So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Bill Briggs. I'm a senior technical account manager here at SolidWorks in our field services department. If you don't know me, it's either because you haven't had a significant problem or you're still having it and haven't reported it yet. So I've got with me some other members on the field services team. They helped put this presentation together from our collective knowledge. We're going to get through the slides and then have some Q&A at the end. These guys are going to be available to help answer some of the questions, especially for the slides that are specifically their content that maybe not as familiar as they are. So we'll let a few more people find their way in here. Having a hard time hearing me? All right, thanks. Sort that out here a little bit. All right, so jump into the first slide here. So kind of what is enterprise PDM site management? I tried to come up with something catchy that maybe you could take home with you. It's the adaptation of the fluid nature of your environment by planning for what's predictable and being prepared for what's not, okay? Which essentially is just saying that we're all trying to keep our heads above water, right? Speaking of which, I kind of thought of an analogy to go along with that fluid nature. If you take your environment and you think of it as that bottle of water, if you leave it alone, will it maintain itself, right? Eventually, the water is going to evaporate, so you can't do nothing. And there's lots of things that affect the environment, right? So if I bump the table, you know, it's moving around, it's changing, it's always changing. So to think that you can install your enterprise PDM implementation and just leave it be and walk away is not going to be a good long-term strategy. So looking more specifically at why it's necessary for you or what you need it for, again, your environment's changing. Your business processes change, your data sets expand, your technology evolves, and your performance degrades. Right? I'm sure none of us are suffering from performance that just arbitrarily gets faster over time. Your client PC, one day you come in and it's faster. That just doesn't happen, right? So we need to plan and prepare for that and do some maintenance work to keep this stuff running smoothly, okay? So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we can achieve this, all right? So let's move right into that. So to me, the most important part of managing your site is documentation. We all know it. We don't really like to do it, so we neglect it, okay? So this is something that we just got to make sure we take the time to do. So everything starts with your business requirements, okay? We're outside of CAD now and we're in a bigger picture, all right? So the problem starts here, and in some cases, we lose sight of where the business requirements came from. Okay, the one key question, which is why? You know, why do we do what we do? And if you don't document that, if you don't pass that along to the next generations, you lose it and you end up just doing things because it was always done that way, right? Which isn't a great reason. Your business requirements drive your business processes, okay? Your business processes are what define your software configuration. All right, and we'll take kind of maybe a real world example of what that is. So a requirement might be that in order for you to distribute your product globally, you have to work from a restricted list of materials, okay? So that's your requirement. So what's the difference between a requirement and a process? The process is actually, you know, requiring a purchasing agent to sign off or approve your material selections for your components before they're released. How does that affect software? Taking Enterprise PDM, for example, in order to achieve this requirement or this process, we set up maybe a transition in your workflow that on submit for release, you have a condition that if your purchasing agent hasn't signed off on it, it won't pass through, right? So this is what I'm talking about in, you know, understanding, you know, what your needs are, how to facilitate it, and getting that documented. Because if you have a problem with your transition not working, you know, it's one thing to know or to look at why that functionality might be broken or not working, but it's another to understand what you're trying to achieve altogether, because we might want to go down a completely different path if we know that. Once you have all of this set up, and we're not talking just one requirement, we're talking all of your requirements, you're going to need to have an infrastructure that's going to support that. Okay, and your infrastructure is going to be based on software requirements, number of users, facilities, things like that. So in your infrastructure, again, we need to document that. All right, we want to know all about your server specifications, OSs, things like that. Same thing with your client PCs. A lot of times we get into working with you, and you maybe have some information, maybe not all of it, maybe not up to date. So we all know we need to do it. It's housekeeping. We just have to make sure it gets done. Network information. We want to know things like latency and bandwidth and other network-related information. One thing we're going to keep coming back to time and time again today, you're going to see this this particular icon referred to several times, is getting performance baselines. If we think back to the first slide, with data sets expanding, as these data sets grow, performance is becoming more of an issue. All right, we have a lot of enterprise PDM customers now that have been using the system for several years. Their data sets are maturing and growing, and now we need to start looking at how to maintain that performance. And you need to know where you started from to know whether or not your performance is actually degrading over time or not. All right, so again, if we go back to, and I'd also like to mention that we're not just talking about benchmarking your hardware, we're also talking about benchmarking your software, okay? Now, if we leave that all alone, and we think back to the water example, if nothing changes, you can probably get away with not having the documentation, but we know that it's going to. One way that it may change is somebody has a bright idea, which leads to a new business requirement, which leads to a new business process. That process leads to change. Change means you have to reconfigure your software. And I said we keep coming back to the performance baseline. Anytime that you're making changes to your software configuration or your environment, you have to rerun that baseline, okay? Both for comparison purposes at that time, to know if you had a negative or positive gain from the actions that you did, but also to have that new benchmark going forward. So again, we know our requirements are going to change. We need to document those changes, and we'll talk more about why later on. All right, another thing that can lead to change, going back to the first slide, is new technology. All right, we're all probably pretty excited to see what's going to be shown on stage tomorrow. Wednesdays is always like Christmas come early for us engineers when we see what's coming in SolidWorks and future releases. We want to leverage that, so we do upgrades. Upgrades will lead to more performance baselines, okay? Now, again, inevitably, we're going to have support issues, all right? When those support issues come up, the very first thing that's going to happen is we're going to want to know information about your environment, right? What are your PC specifications? How's your software configured? What's changed? Particularly what's changed recently. Okay, we're going to look at when your problem occurred and see if we can line that up with any changes that were made around that time frame. So you're going to get asked these questions over and over again, and you can rewrite or re-explain these answers every time, or you can get it documented, and every time you're asked it, you can just hand forward the document, and that's going to make the support process much more efficient and get you answers much quicker. And in a lot of cases, it may help you resolve the issues on your own without having to escalate the issue to your VAR or to SolidWorks, which again is going to take additional time. All right, so if we look at the support issues, there's two main branches I'd like to talk about today. The first bucket we'll look at is software bugs. Going to happen. Those bugs, hopefully are going to be fixed in a service pack. So service pack comes in, patches up the software. That leads to another upgrade. That upgrade leads to software configuration changes and a new performance baseline. Okay? So documenting that these changes were made and why they were made is really important. Okay? The other issue we want to look at is performance. Okay? We know that in some way, whether it's with SolidWorks, with Enterprise PDM, with your hardware, we're going to have to deal with software performance at some time, especially for larger companies. One of the important things with performance is understanding the delta to your baseline. That's going to give you the scope or the impact of the issue. It's also going to help you know where you have to get back to. You know, if something is running slower and you need to fix it, how far do you go? You know, if it's taken a minute to do something that you think it shouldn't take that long, you know, do you need to get back to 30 seconds, to 10 seconds, to 3 seconds? If you don't know the answer to that, then you may not sufficiently resolve the issue. And if you don't get all the way back to where you were, slowly over time, that'll keep your benchmark will keep slipping on you. So it's really important to have that baseline. And one thing I'd like to point out is today we are not going to really go into the details of how to do some of these things. I'm not going to show you how to document stuff, how to do a performance baseline, but there's lots of information out there available on our knowledge bases and through your resellers and other aspects to learn how to do these things. So you just need to know it's something that you have to do. All right, that's a pretty busy slide, but I think it emphasizes the importance of having this stuff documented, because I'm kind of starting to lose my mind just a little bit. Frank was telling me that maybe they're getting close to being able to scan your mind and kind of back it up, which would be great if I could have an app then that I could just recall, you know, things, let my life flash before my eyes without actually, you know, dying. Anyway. All right, so site documentation, very, very important, often neglected. All right, this is a tool that maybe some of you have heard about. It's been talked about, you know, by Greg Jankowski in the CAD Admin Bootcamp. Maybe some of you are using it. It's in 2013. I wanted to throw this slide in here just so that you know when it comes to this site documentation, I think this could have a huge impact on being able to manage some of that. So some of the things that this can do, you know, using your performance feedback or customer experience feedback from your SolidWorks sessions, it's collecting information like system options, details of the machine, the OS, the software versions, drivers on your graphics cards and such, for instance. It's also giving you benchmark scores from SolidWorks RX. You know, those are reported in here. Information about your system stability, crashes, kills, things like that in your sessions. Very useful information. I really encourage you to go to this presentation later today. I think it's going to be a key part of your role. It's from 4:30 to 6, and it's put on by, it's actually being presented by some of the developers who worked on it. So they're going to know the ins and outs of it. So it's your chance to really learn everything there is about that. All right. Here's a kind of a new topic that's come up in the last couple of months. Again, back to the data sets expanding and performance degrading. This is a new thing that I've been working on, and I was a little bit hesitant to bring it up today. It's something that you're going to see, I'm quite certain, this year. But if you were to leave here and go to your reseller and ask them questions about this, they're either not going to know that we're looking in this direction, or tell you what we've been saying for the last few years, which is to kind of keep your hands out of this cookie jar. Okay, but that's changing as we adapt to the fluid nature of what's going on in your environments. So I'm gonna talk about some of this stuff, but it's not really. I don't want you to run off and to attempt these things on your own. You know, don't try this at work, kind of a thing. So with that said, I'm gonna kind of walk you through kind of the things that I've been doing and why, but it's gonna be just kind of a brief thing so that you're aware of what we're doing and can look into it this year if it's a necessity. So what I've been doing lately is looking at a workload analysis of your SQL server. Okay, to keep SQL tuned, you know, it takes a little bit of maintenance. I talked to an old friend of mine this morning, and he told me that they've got some other databases in their system that are running on SQL, and they have dedicated database administrators that are keeping those databases tuned all the time. So maybe we need to do that with Enterprise PDM. A workload analysis is basically where I monitor your system for a whole week, and it collects a bunch of data about what SQL is doing in the background. And it doesn't really matter if it's Enterprise PDM or some other user interface or application. This is all core SQL stuff that allows me to tune indexes, and we're talking beyond just index rebuilding here. We're talking actual index tuning. It allows me to understand what I can configure differently in SQL with various settings and such. And it also lets me give feedback to my developers on queries that they could optimize to take more advantage of or making things faster for the way that you work. Because each one of your databases, even if you're working with out-of-the-box settings, they have their own twist to them. They have your own disbursement of data, your own flavor. And so to think that we can get SQL to perform on its own like this static glass of water, it's not going to happen. It's going to need some tweaking. So take that workload analysis, we can also do some trending and forecasting, where we can look at your data growth. We can look at query statistics, meaning which are your most expensive queries that are going on. We can look at your hardware usage, all right? So for those of you that are working in virtual environments, right, that's kind of evolving as well. We're adapting to the possibility of actually moving into virtual environments as we move forward, because it's an industry trend. And this will let you monitor, are you getting good data throughput, from a hardware standpoint, things like that. We can predict if you're using this much resources today and you're growing at this rate, you're going to outrun your system's capabilities at this point in time, and you can proactively plan to increase your infrastructure to handle that growth. Okay, again, with the workload analysis, with real-time monitoring, we can set up alerts. Right? There are some cases, and maybe some of you in the room have dealt with this, and I don't want to scare everyone, because this isn't happening on a wide-scale basis, and it's generally with larger companies, but not our large companies. Maybe you have a situation where one user does something and it locks up enterprise PDM for everybody else for some amount of time. In some cases, it comes back after a few minutes. In some cases, it may not come back for hours, and you need to go in and kill a process. You can actually get maybe an alert about that block sent to your phone, and you can kill that process as an administrator right from your phone and let your users get back to work. Then you can go through the workload analysis and historic review of the data and address the problem that happened and let your users work. So very, very useful stuff, and we're just on the verge of this, so be looking for some white papers, some best practices. Maybe your VAR is reaching out to you proactively to discuss some of the stuff, maybe coming this year. All right, again, back in the site documentation slide, we talked about technical support issues. They're going to happen. When an issue happens, there's certain things that you can do on your end to manage that issue and help it come to resolution quicker and more efficiently. So when an issue is encountered, first thing that you're going to do is maybe go out and check our online community, check your knowledge base, our knowledge base, check the forums. If you don't find an answer, you need to report it. You're going to escalate it. It may be escalating it internally to your own help desk or escalating it to your SolidWorks VAR. When you report an issue, the more prepared you are, going back to documentation, the more efficient the support process is going to be. But some of the key things that you want to keep in mind are the summary. Let's get them all on the screen. So you want to have a description of the problem, the number of users affected, and the cost, the time lost per each user. Now, on one hand, you might think that's just simply so that we can classify your issue and say, compared to this company's issue, whose is more important? It really goes beyond that. I'm going to crank my volume up, show them. All right, anyway, so it's not just about classification or prioritization for us to support your issues or for your VAR to support your issue. It's for us to understand the scope of the problem so that when we think about alternative methods, workarounds, solutions, we can take that into account, all right? And we can give you responses that make sense for the impact of your issue. All right, so you contact your VAR. You've got all this information prepared before you contact your VAR to make that engagement more efficient, because they're going to ask for it anyway. The good news is probably 90% of those issues are going to be resolved by your VAR. All right? Now, for the rest of them, for the other 10% of the issues, they're going to escalate that issue to SolidWorks support. All right? And then we have, good communications with our VARs. We're back and forth on the issues, and the VAR should be communicating with you as to what's going on in that process. But we're going to spend some time. We're going to work through this. And even here at SolidWorks, we have resources behind us, which is why, in a lot of cases, our VARs are just as aware of, just have the same technical abilities that we do, but we've got some resources behind us that we can feed back to the VAR, which is talking to our product developers, talking to our product definition team if it's maybe more of an enhancement request than a bug. And of course, some of our issues are customer-centered related issues, order management, things like that. So we've got them all behind us, supporting us, giving us feedback. We feedback to the VARs and they feedback to you. The key here really is documentation and communication, all right? And it's communication from all the way from you to us and back again. I would like to make a quick point on the last slide. We had one customer that reported for us some real statistics from their environment. They reported, this is kind of where the 90% comes from. They reported 2,000 tickets that were submitted, and of those, the VAR was able to solve all, but maybe the VAR they handled most of them internally. The VAR handled 200. We handled 20. It's kind of the way that filtered out. So if you're able to do that in your site, to handle that huge percentage of issues on your own, it's going to be more efficient, right? Because we don't have to go through all the layers of communication. All right, the next point that we're going to move into, again, is something that it's really important, and I've worded it a different way to try to grab your attention, because we've been talking about doing backups, every year since SolidWorks and Enterprise PDM has been released, and every other software package has been released, right? So, how can you ensure the security of your data, right? Well, the first question is, do I need a backup? If you've asked the question, you need it, okay? If you haven't asked the question, then you should ask the question, in which case you need it, okay? So you can say, well, no, it's a roll of the dice, right? I think we all know that, but it's a good thing to remind you of, again, because sometimes we neglect this. So the right answer, of course, is yes. But that leads you to here. What do I need to back up? When do I need to back it up? And then how are you going to back it up? For the larger companies, you probably have systems in place and you understand how to do this. For the smaller companies, you might not understand how to do this. There enters your reseller who can help you with your backup strategies. Okay, so if you're not sure how to do it or not sure you're doing it the right way, consult with your VAR. Another important thing is to test your backup. And this isn't rocket science. I'm not making robots fly, together right now, right? There's no autonomous swarming going on. So we kind of, I put the test backups, like, do I really need to tell you that? No, but it's something that gets neglected, all right? I was just recently out visiting a customer, and we did a few things, and those things didn't work, and they needed to go to backup. So we went and got their backup, and it didn't work. Backup was broken. So we had to go to a backup from 2 weeks prior to that. Fortunately, through a little bit of magic, we were able to extract what we needed from the backup and insert it into the current data set. And life moved on, but it was scary for a few minutes, and it caused us a couple of extra hours of work that day. So test your backups, make sure that they work. And we're going to talk on the next slide about how you can test your backups regularly for use with some sandbox testing. So, all right, when you test your backup, if it fails, you can consult with your VAR, try again. If it succeeds, then you can rest easy. Okay? So that's backups. We all know we need to do it, and we just need to follow through on it. Test it, make sure it works. One thing I neglected to do like 25 minutes ago, but we'll roll back to it. Questions. What I'm going to do is have the Q&A at the end with these guys helping me. So if you do have any questions during the slide, just keep track of them, and we can come back to that at the very end. Okay, sandboxes. Every company should have a sandbox, whether you're a large company or a small company. Everything that we're talking about today applies to all companies of all sizes, Even the global site management we're going to get into later, everything applies to you guys, and it's just maybe at a different scale, okay? Now, what I would like to do to kind of slow things down here a little bit and maybe catch your attention again. I was at the Minneapolis airport a couple of weeks ago and waiting for a ride, and I'm looking at the brochures of all the things to do in Minnesota, and one of the brochures was called Extreme Sandbox. Caught my attention, right? So I pick up the brochure and I'm looking at it. Apparently, you can go rent excavators, bulldozers, all that kind of stuff, and just go out and dig holes, move stuff around. Like, really? So anyway, I'm thinking next time I'm in Minnesota, I'm going to allow maybe an extra day. So sandboxes, maybe not quite as much fun as excavators and such in the enterprise PDM or SolidWorks world, but they're a necessity, so we need to get those going. A sandbox allows us to do testing, amongst other things, okay? So, one great way to do sandboxes is with scalable virtual testing, okay? When you do this in a virtual environment, it allows you to take snapshots, to do branching, to try something, to roll back to where you're at. Takes less resources, than using physical environment. We really encourage this process, but you can also, of course, do your sandbox testing in physical environments. There's a number of technologies out there that you can use for this. And I mentioned earlier that, again, there's a little bit of a shift, at least in the forward thinking for me and for my team. I say my team, my coworkers. And that is that virtual environments are what everybody's going to. And while our general SolidWorks support is going to say, we can't necessarily support every environment in terms of being able to fix your virtual environments for you, I think we're shifting more to your virtual environment really should work, and as long as you can ensure that you're getting all the throughput that you need, it's okay. It's okay to start looking into that. And of course, a good place to start testing whether you can roll out a virtual environment is in your sandbox. All right, so in your sandbox, there's 4 different configurations that we can use. All right, the first is your default vault. If you encounter a problem, okay, so this is getting away from testing and more into troubleshooting, and that the testing will kind of come in the end. So you can create a brand new vault, default settings, default files, take the problem that you're having, try it out. If it works in the default vault, that helps us know it's something in your configuration, helps us narrow down the search. The next one is the CEX restore. Of course, the CEX being the export from the administrator tool, Enterprise PDM Administrator tool, that allows you to capture your database settings and import them into an empty vault. Now you have a duplicate of your vault settings without any of your files, any of your data. If you can reproduce an issue in that environment, then you know that the problem is generic to your setup. If you can't, the problem is specific to your data, okay, in your production environment. The database restore is where we talked about from the previous slide with the backups. You create a backup of your database and you restore that on another SQL server, and then we have ways to reconnect a new user interface vault to that database backup. Okay, and again, this is stuff that your reseller can help you with. We do have some solutions on it. Actually, I'm not confident if those solutions are publicly available to all users or just to your resellers, but it can be done. So work with them to understand how to do it. The database restore with archives, there's actually 2 levels to that. We can restore a full backup of your database and a full backup of your archives, and you have a one-to-one copy of your production environment to do a full suite of testing, a full suite of troubleshooting. You can also do your restore with partial archives. For some of you that are very large companies that have millions of files, it's maybe not realistic to do a complete restore of your archives, but you can select a particular assembly or drawing or project or something, and you can pull just the archives for that, which lets you use a subset of your data. So a great way to do sandbox testing. I'm going to continue to drink some of your environment here. All right. This, very important. In fact, it's so important that I'm not really going to talk about it in this session because it's more than I can get into in the time that we have allotted today. So, my colleague Jerome, 2:45 today, going to go through upgrade planning from one end to the other. It's an inevitable part of your process. Talked about it on the first slide. Business processes change, technology evolves. We need to incorporate, new software to leverage that. All right. A couple of things that I will kind of mention as a teaser. It's not just about you when it comes to upgrade planning. Okay, you need to make sure that you meet all the prerequisites. Yeah, never mind. We'll just leave that one alone. Your IT department, you need to work with them and make sure that your infrastructure is ready. You need to make sure that you have the resources available. You need to make sure that you can still work with your suppliers. Okay, you need to make sure that you're compatible with other software products that you have. You need to make sure that you're not still running Windows XP, for instance, right? If you're still running that, you're not ready for 2013. And when it comes to the new technology, you want to know, is it going to solve any of your problems that you have, any SPRs you have reported, any challenges you're facing? And what are you going to gain from that upgrade? Are you upgrading just to upgrade, or is there actually something there that is going to facilitate a need that you have? So Jerome will talk about this in full detail later today. And again, I really encourage you to go to this presentation. One of the main things I hope you get out of that presentation is how to start targeting SP0, targeting beta. All right, you don't necessarily have to upgrade to SP0, but I would like you to start testing so that you know if you could or couldn't, right? So that if you can't go to SP0, you can tell us to fix the things that kept you from doing it so that you can move to SP1 or 2 with those things fixed. Instead of getting to SP5 and asking for hot fixes, or then having to upgrade to the next major version to get the things that you hadn't reported earlier in the development cycle. Okay, we're going to spend a lot of time on this slide, maybe about as much time as we spent on the site documentation, because this is obviously an important part of managing your site. And whether you're a small company or a large company, there's a lot of services that you actually provide, whether you realize that you provide them or not. All right, I'll take you around the circle here. Starting with site documentation because I feel it's really important. It's an important part of all of our foundation for all of our support processes. So you provide technical support. If it's as simple as a user standing up and yelling over top of their cubicle, asking you how to do something, that's technical support. You do issue tracking. It may be in your head, all right? It may be on an Excel spreadsheet. It may be in software. You may have some issue tracking software, but you're doing it. You have a knowledge base. That knowledge base could be as sophisticated as, again, some kind of an internal SharePoint site. Might be leveraging our knowledge base. It might be sticky notes on your computer screen, but you have knowledge bases. Best practices, again, everybody has them. We really, really encourage you to get structure to it, to make them available to all of your users. A lot of the problems that you face in support are because users are not doing things the same way. They're not following your standards and stuff. So this is all stuff that we all know we need to do. We just need to take the initiative to do it. And sometimes, these become projects that get sidelined because you're busy firefighting other things, other problems, other issues. And kind of the ironic part is, if you were doing this, you might not be spending so much time firefighting, and you'd have more time, to focus on getting these processes in place. Internal training, it's important because you can send your users to all the training classes that we have, your resellers have, and there's still an element of what you do, how to work in your system. So we need to make sure that you have some work instructions, some form of training to bring them up to speed in your environment. User group meetings, again, you have these even if you don't. It might be at the coffee machine, but you have user group meetings. But I suggest that you have structured user group meetings. You don't necessarily have to meet every week or every month, but you should be meeting regularly. We do it. Our team meets. We try to meet at least once a month, especially because we're distributed globally. We like to know what each other's doing. And even one of our goals for next year is to spend more time with meeting with each other to really discuss what we've been doing so that we're not out there doing the same thing but starting from scratch each time, because I don't know the techniques that they use to do something. When I run into that problem, I've got to start from scratch. So that kind of communication through user group meetings is really important. The last one is something that I just recently noticed that needs to get done. Probably most of you in here are big fans of SolidWorks, big fans of our products. You love to come here, you're energized about it, and you might have an issue, and the issue is, it might be a bad issue, but your persona to me and to your VAR is that you understand, we're going to work through it, you're happy with the progress, and a lot of that is because, again, you know, you're happy overall about the product. Your executives might not have that same personal tie, okay, that maybe you have with the SolidWorks community. So they might have a temperament that I'm not seeing or your VAR is not seeing, because you become a buffer for that, right? So it's really important that when we're working with you day in and day out to resolve an issue, especially long-running issues, that you're reporting back to your executives and letting them know what's happening in that engagement. Because if you let 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month go by and you haven't given them any updates, we could have made a ton of progress, in all it takes is for one of the users to go to the management, the executive team, and say, that issue we've been having, it's costing me so much time, it's still happening, we've got to get this done. And because it came from this channel and not from you, now, you know, you're in a confrontation with your executives, and we're getting caught off guard because we had no idea that there was this level of temperament going on. So reporting upstream from your end is really, really important for us and for you. Okay, so who does all of this work, right? It's being done by, oh, I missed one. So if you look at this slide and it's too intense and you think I can't support this structure, you can take advantage of our subscription services. You know, if you're on subscription with us, you get VAR support. Your reseller can do all of these things and they can help you do it. So leverage your reseller to be able to provide these services to your end users. Your reseller is going to be communicating with your power users and your CAD administrators. Okay? They're the ones that are applying or facilitating all of these processes. Okay? And by channeling your communications to the VAR or even to your, you know, to your help desk support team, by channeling all of that to one place, you know what's going on. You know, it's fine to have all of your users contact your VARs independently, but then you're not going to know what questions are being asked. So you won't be able to build your knowledge base or your best practices or your internal training based on the things that they're facing. So I really encourage you to funnel that stuff so that you can keep an active report and training in what's going on. So who are you supporting? You're supporting your local users and your global users. With that said, we'll move into kind of a discussion on effective management of global sites. For those of you that don't have replication, don't have remote sites, some of these things that we're going to talk about can still apply to what you have going on in a single site implementation. Okay, steering committees. It's very, very important that you get all of the right people involved when you're dealing with global sites. Okay, because now it's not just about what you're doing for your users at your local site. You need to have representation from all of your facilities. Okay, and this representation needs to communicate on what your plans are. So you want to get this established. And again, I do the same thing you did with the help desk. You want to have a lead from each site, you want to have power users from each site, and you want to funnel all of that stuff together so that you really have single points of contact between all of those sites and not users contacting everybody from everywhere else, and you don't have any control of that situation. So again, get yourself some leads developed, get a relationship going. That's out of order. So another important thing on global rollouts is testing. We talked about it earlier. Testing is important. But when you think about something on a global scale, the importance of testing is multiplied, by a factor of, well, a lot. So and again, it's something that needs to be coordinated, through your leads at your other sites. It's kind of the difference. Everybody asks me in field services, what do you do, right? You work with EPDM, and we kind of get pigeonholed into the idea that all we support is situations around EPDM, and the reason for that is SolidWorks, a lot of times the issues only affect one user or two users and how they design a specific widget. With Enterprise PDM, an issue affects the entire company. So there again, when you're global, the effect of it is much higher. All right, so the planning. When you're working globally, you need to make sure that everything that you do is thought out on how it, not just how it affects you, but how it affects what you have going on with your other sites. Things as simple as replication. To set up a replication schedule overseas that runs overnight for them might be running in the middle of the day for your facility, right? And if you're not communicating and working with and strategizing with your other sites, you'll start tripping over top of each other with some of that. So it just becomes more important in a global environment. There's the slide I was looking for earlier. So all of that is achieved with communication. It becomes really, really crucial to make sure that when you're making decisions, decisions to upgrade, decisions to do things like that, that you talk to your other sites and you get their input back. It's kind of a cross, it's a way to manage a situation without mandating like a dictatorship or without having to take a vote on everything like a democracy. Okay, it's something in between that's achieved through communications. One thing that we want to think about globally as well is connection speeds. This is where latency, bandwidth, things like that really come into play. As most of you know, we don't replicate our SQL server, and that can lead to some performance concerns isn't right. You need to be aware of what that connection speed is, because it's going to have more of an impact in a higher latency environment. So you want to know that ahead of time and prepare for it. All right, rollouts. The timing of a rollout, the strategy for a rollout, again, affected more in a global environment. You're still following the same steps as you would do with a local rollout, but you've got to take into consideration these other sites, and it's kind of like it's almost like a supplier, right? I said before, you can upgrade, you need to make sure that you can still work with your suppliers. The same thing applies with your global sites. And you need to coordinate the efforts because, especially with Enterprise PDM, obviously you need to stay on the same release, right? And so if your remote sites are not ready to upgrade when you are, that rollout is not going to be successful. And another key thing is when you get this done, you get a proven methodology. You need to follow that, right? So all of this comes together, and you need to be that much more aware. All right, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this concept. We all know that we need to do project management, but specifically there's some industry standards that we've been kind of pushing from a project management standpoint that we're trying to encourage all of you to do. We're going to talk about it a little bit more when we see our Certified Enterprise PDM Administrator exam. We'll talk about that later. We're encouraging you guys, the administrators, to get this certification. One of the things that's in there is project management. And we got a little bit of pushback at first because it's a new concept to some people. And when they first see it, they're not quite sure what to do with it. So for starters, I'm just going to give you the basics of it. So first thing you have to understand is what a project is. All right, projects are temporary, Projects are very unique. They have a defined start and an end, and they're created for a specific purpose, all right? Many of us have projects that may have started out this way, but are still going, and are going to go into the foreseeable future, right? So we have to remember that this is a task, all right? And we need to achieve, in order to achieve success, we'll move right into that. We've all seen this before. You need to deliver your projects on time, on quality, and on budget, all right? Which again, you can only do if you keep in mind that this project was put in place to have a start and an end. Now, some of you might wonder if project management is the right approach for you. At what point does project management become effective from a cost analysis standpoint? Because there's overhead in project management for sure. A lot of times it's easier to just pick up the shovel and dig the hole than to do the planning side of it, okay? So what I'll show you here, this is kind of a chart that explains, your project cost versus the complexity here. When does a best effort, all right? And best effort to me is really an unpredictable effort, okay? When does that become more efficient to have project management? So if we look at kind of the connecting point that it shows here, you can see the gap at first. You can see that it's maybe it is better to use a best effort approach. Eventually, to a very significant scale, taking a project management approach is going to be the better way to go. And I would say that just do it all the time. The more efficient you get at it, that initial gap is going to go away. So again, it applies to everybody, large or small. All right, so you as a project manager, you have responsibilities. Okay, in order to maximize the benefits of project management and to minimize, the pitfalls, the mistakes that are made without it, you have some responsibilities. One of them is planning and coordinating the activities. Okay, and you want to do this without getting too involved in the details. One of the most common mistakes that you can have as a project manager is really trying to micromanage those details. So you put the process in place, you coordinate the activities, and let your people that are supposed to do those activities get them done for you. Another thing that you need to do is create the estimates. All right, when we think about what makes a project successful, delivering on time, right? Delivering on quality and on budget. A very easy thing to do when estimating is to just overshoot by 2 months. Sure, I can get it done on time every time if I pad that stat, right? But if you do that, you're not going to be able to get it done on budget. All right? And you think, well, I could just cut some corners, save on the budget, makes the estimating easier. If you do that, you're not going to be able to deliver on quality. Okay? So it's really important that you're able to establish good estimates, and that's going to come with practice over time. Another thing that you have to do is manage risks. You're in control of what's going on. We talk about global rollouts, right? There's things that you can put in place to make sure that you're working with proactively your other sites, with your other leads. You're managing, the risks in the situation. The way that you achieve this coordination is through team building, right? There's ways to ask people to do things and tell people to do things, and there's ways to get them to actually do it. And through team building and cooperation, you can achieve a lot. And of course, it's all done through proper communications, right? Effective communications. And again, probably, I'm assuming that everybody in this room has somebody to report to. So your communications it's not down only. It's not only one directional to the people on your team that are working for you. It's up to your management as well. All right, so I mentioned I wanted to talk about our Certified PDM Administration exam. You probably heard on stage today that this exam is free. I believe they said through June. I think it's important for you to take, because by taking the exam, you're going to force yourself to learn more about enterprise PDM. Okay? You're going to have to learn about project management. You're going to have to learn about the various settings in Enterprise PDM. You know, a lot of you may have inherited an implementation, or you may have had your VAR do your implementation. But it's time, you know, when it's time for you to take over and to start managing your site, you know, you need to be aware of the other things that Enterprise PDM can do, so that when you're ready to expand, or you have new process changes and such, that you understand what's going on and you're able to incorporate some of those other features that maybe you're not familiar with. Because one of the first complaints or feedback, I guess feedback's a better word, that we had about the exam was, well, I got to ask questions about stuff that I don't do. Our system's not set up that way. The idea of the exam is that you understand everything, so that if you need that functionality, you know it's there, and you can implement it. What just happened? I pushed like lots of buttons all the time, and now just this one time I decided to use a different one. That was weird. Unpredictable. All right, so this slide I just want to throw up there just so that you can grab any information off of it. It's the same things that we were just talking about. This is all on our website. Okay, you can go out to our certifications page. You can find the CIPA exam. Everything on the previous slide, everything on this slide is at the site. This is all online, like all the rest of our exams now. The exam itself consists of a hands-on portion, a couple of questions, and then a list of just, you know, multiple choice questions. The hands-on itself, we're going to give you a real-world scenario. You know, Daniel needs to check this file out. Why can't he check it out? And you've got to go in and look at why. Or, you know, why didn't this happen the way that it was expected to? So you got to go in, look at the setup, make some changes, get it to work properly. That's kind of what the hands-on portion of it consists of. And that leaves us a lot of time for Q&A. So, because we do have a considerable amount of time left, I'd really like to encourage some dialogue here. You have an opportunity with all of my team here to really pick our brains, ask us some questions, and we can roll back into any of these particular topics and get in more detail, cover them in more depth. And so, if for those of you that want to stick around, you know, we'll spend as much time as you need. Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead. Okay, so probably most of us are aware of the SolidWorks RX, the benchmark that they have in there. That's going to give you just simply, it's more of a hardware-related benchmark because you're using default files. Okay, so it's not going to tell you how your files rebuild. It's going to give you an idea of where your PC is at. And that's great to measure degradation of your physical hardware. Another thing that we need you to check is definitely latency and bandwidth, and we're talking from, you know, between your servers, from your clients to your servers. Do you need to go to every single client and check the connection speed? No, but you want to get a sampling set of a few of your clients. Another thing that you want to look at is throughput on your server is huge. So take like perfmon on your server and capture some statistics over time, kind of a workload analysis. So you're seeing how much disk I/O you have, how much memory you're using, you know, how much read and write your CPU is doing. You know, look at where that's at and how well it's delivering those resources so that you can come back later and run a comparison against that. Now, of course, one of the biggest things we're talking about here is Enterprise PDM. And how do you benchmark that performance? There's two ways to do it effectively. You can do it manually now by just simply checking files in and out, certain data sets, and recording the time it takes to do it and the time it takes to change state, but that's not very scientific. So we have a tool that we released last year that we didn't get a lot of traction with because it was kind of our, almost, I want to call it a beta tool, but it was new. It was our first go at it. It was called the Enterprise PDM Benchmark Tool. That lets you build test cases where you can measure the time it takes to do those check-ins and check-outs and stuff like that. And essentially what you're looking for is, one of the common things we'll get is, I'm trying to do a change state and it's taken 5 minutes and it used to take, 20 seconds. But the only way to know that was to have measured that change state on a specific set of data at a specific point in time that you can rerun that test, at a later date. So we've done some work on the benchmark tool. We have a version 2 of it that's nearly ready. And again, your resellers aren't going to really know about this tool because we didn't do a lot of marketing with it last year because we were still kind of working on how we wanted that tool to function. But I think you're going to see that becoming more available this year. Another thing that we have with the good thing about the benchmark tool is we can configure it to your environment. So we can use your files, your workflows, your transitions, your variables, your search cards, things like that, and we can measure your processes. Another thing that we're doing goes back to my SQL maintenance slide. I'm finding now that I can measure your performance at the SQL level, which takes out all of the client and network factors that can take away that apples-to-apples comparison that you would get. Because at any given day, your computer can just run slower for various reasons. So by measuring it at the SQL level, I can get a more accurate representation of where you're physically at in that process. So yeah, it's everything from hardware to software, both in SolidWorks and Enterprise PDM. Anything that you can put a number on, try to capture it. And that can be really helpful in the support process. In the back? For the benchmark tool? If you ask your VAR about it, then you can ask them to ask SolidWorks about it. Just ask them to go just say, I need this done. If you haven't seen it yet, could you please engage SolidWorks support? And we'll go for there. So yeah, it's probably going to be, we can use the existing tool to some limited extent right now. We pretty much are restricted to using a default vault with default files because it's a little bit intense to build custom test plans with the original version of the tool. So we can do some testing now, but I'm thinking more maybe beginning of next quarter when we'll really be ready to go with the new tool. So we'll do what we can do now and maybe look for some more capabilities later in the year.
So you're saying it's not available to run on the default one to see how your hardware behaves?
Yes and no. It's the one you have right now would be it's a good example. It would be just a hardware baseline, but you can configure the existing one to use on your vault. But the test plan is an XML test plan, so you have to put in I'm going to add a file. Here's a file name. I'm going to add another file. Here's a file name. If you don't code that, it could take a long time to build any kind of significant size test plan. So what we're working on is an automated way to build that test plan so that you can test your setup more efficiently. We do have some customers that are using the original version that have taken the time either to enter it in or have written some little scripts to do it for them, so we certainly could do it now. Back here? This presentation? Yes, all of the presentations at World are going to be posted after the conference. I'm not 100% sure of the details on the timeline, but they will all be they'll all be posted.
The enterprise exam, usually depend on our own vault, and whoever needs to be like a go-to meeting kind of thing using you guys set up.
No, what you'll find with that, when you first start the exam, the very first question of the exam is 0 points, and it has some steps to download a zip file that contains some instructions and things that you need to do to set it up. So it's going to be running on your own SQL server. It's going to be running in your own environment. So one of the prerequisites that you'll see in the exam is you need to be ready to create a new vault, import settings, and roll it out and start working with it. So you need passwords and things like that. So make sure your infrastructure is ready, or you'll download the exam, won't be able to do anything. You need your SA password for sure in order to be able to do the exam. Bill?
I just have a question. You mentioned going to server or looking at service packs. You'll start looking at what for large install service pack today is like a brand new release for PDM for SolidWorks. We can put the service pack on 5 machines and test it. That's what people help with. So is there any effort for service pack for PDM or is it as easy as
You're talking about just the physical effort to do the upgrade or the planning?
Today, from what I, maybe I'm wrong, but from what I understand, if you want to apply a service back to VMworks, it's like going to the next release. As far as I know.
I'm not really sure what we're doing to make the enterprise EPDM any different than it is now. I'm really not even that up to speed on the current process of rolling out enterprise PDM, because my enterprise PDM implementations, or not implementations, but installations, are generally restricted to 1 or 2 computers that I do in my testing environment. So I haven't really looked at the large scale. Yeah, I think these might be tied together. You guys aware of anything with Well, let me actually introduce my team, if I could just do that. So the guy in the back, the bouncer, that's my boss, Preston Hagman. So I told him not to let anybody leave, but he's letting them go. This is Frank Aloya. He's our program manager. Jerome, he's again, which one of our kind of my counterpart over in France, just providing field services support. Neil, Jerome's manager. Again, we all kind of do the same work. And Jurgen, again, the same thing. And then kind of my report here. These guys are overseas, and Gagan and I are here in the States. So we kind of work closely together. And we all really work as a team. So we've all, again, contributed to this content, so they can also help with these questions. And you may be seeing some of us if ever you need some field support. So Frank, with that said, can you take that question?
Yeah, sure. I can't give you a lot of details because it's really early on, but what I can tell you is that as I'm involved in a regular quality initiative meeting, with our development team, with our product definition team. And one of the things that is on our list to look at and to figure out what we can do to improve it is installations implementation. So that whole process is being scrutinized to understand what and when we'll actually be able to make some changes. We realize it can be made better, that's for sure. So I think in the coming releases, you will see improvements to make it as easy as it can be.
And those questions too, while you're here at SolidWorks World, if you get an opportunity to go by the SolidWorks booth or what, we might be able to connect you with some of our product managers that are here, and you can voice some of those concerns, with them, with the needs that you have. So I'd start with the SolidWorks booth too to try to get to those folks. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'll repeat that for everybody in the back. So when we talk about creating a sandbox, and creating that sandbox by restoring a backup copy of your production environment, if you're on the same network, one of the obvious concerns, of course, is having databases with the same name. And obviously, if it was in the same SQL instance, that's going to be a major problem. Obviously, that wouldn't even work to begin with. If it's on a different instance, you're really okay on the database name side of it, You could have a problem with the client in terms of trying to have local views of vaults with the same name and stuff, so that can be an issue. So really the question is, how do you facilitate creating a backup copy restore for your sandbox environment without overlapping on your existing production environment? Okay, we do have techniques for renaming your vaults when you restore them to keep everything unique. So it is possible to create everything completely unique if you follow all of those steps. And it adds a little bit of complexity to the process, but a process is a process. And once you have it down, you follow it and you can do it. Now, one thing that you really want to be careful of is even if you do all of your best efforts to keep everything separated, there are still ways that you can cross-talk between your vaults. We all know that the SolidWorks file references are pretty robust in terms of how it goes out through its folder structure and tries, if it can't find it here, it looks at the path and tries to go somewhere else. So you could actually back out of one local vault view and run into another and end up finding files that are in your production vault. So you want to be very, very careful with how you do that. If you can use an isolated environment, isolated even on a different network, that would be ideal. If you can follow all of the steps and be conscious of the ways that you could have some of those issues, then I think you can get around that. Having a local view to both of your test vault and your production vault on the same computer, probably not a good idea, right? It's just one less thing to worry about if you don't do that. And one of the parts of your question was, do we want to use additional physical hardware? Whether it's physical or virtual is a decision that you can make. Again, the virtual is a little bit easier. Definitely a different SQL server is a really good idea. You can use the same SQL server if you have limited resources, but again, I urge you to, if you don't understand exactly what you're doing, work with your reseller to get that configured properly. So a lot of different options to do it. You just want to keep that in mind. It's a very good point to bring up, though. Go ahead. Yeah, it's not so much a tool as a process to do it, because there's only a couple places that you have to make changes to the vault name itself, in the database or wherever. So you got to follow that process. There are tools, however, to create the archive server to go behind the restored vault. So when I restore a database and then rename it to whatever I want it to be renamed using those processes, I can't just run into the enterprise admin tool and see that vault listed there. So in order to achieve that, I run a tool called the Archive Server Creator, where I can specify my server and my database name, and it'll go in and create the registry keys necessary to have that be represented on my computer. It'll create the archive server folders for storing the data. It'll all be empty, but it'll create it and allow me then to create a local view, log in, start testing files. If I need to work with physical files from the production environment, I can then use a tool to go in, get those physical files, just the ones that I want, or all the physical files, and put them in that restored or that recreated empty archive server folder structure so that they show up. Not show up, because the files will always show up, there just won't be any data behind them. So you can see it in Windows Explorer, but if you try to do a get, it'll say the file doesn't exist. So there's a secondary tool that puts those files in there for you. Those need to come from your reseller. Yeah, so contact your reseller and they can get those to you, show you how to use them. And part of them giving them to you would be their due diligence to explain to you all of the scary stuff I talked about based on her question. So, go ahead.
All this kind of moved into the aspect of virtual machines. In my aspect of taking a quick snapshot of your server, or just renaming your copy of the old one and re-implementing a new vault on a virtual machine, but SolidWorks, what's your opinion on it? I've heard that SolidWorks isn't a fan of it. They like their hardware, but on rebuild, safety backups, it's easier.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you're in a virtual environment, the whole backup structure becomes easier. The recreating of test environments becomes easier. So where is our stance on it? I don't think we're all on the same page yet, so you're going you're going to get maybe different responses depending on who you talk to, but the direction that we're heading, I think, is absolutely towards, if not supporting virtual environments, meaning that if you have a problem in this virtual environment, we're going to come in and we're going to find it and fix it. What we're going to try to do is isolate it and decide, is it in the software or is it in your virtual environment? And we're still going to fix those software issues if it's in the software. We're going to try to fix your virtual environment. We just don't have those skill sets, especially not globally among all of our support technicians. So we may not be able to help you, which I think is different than not supporting you. When it comes to virtual environments, I've been learning a lot about them recently. I mean, you have your OS that's running on your virtual environment. When you're looking at that, everything is the same. There's no difference between the virtual and the physical environment. But what there is there's the hardware behind it. We all know that. And there's the allocation of that hardware. And then there's also the configuration settings in your virtual environment. Those configurations are going to be different based on which of the software packages you're using, if it's VMware or VirtualBox or whatever. And that can be where it can get a little bit tricky for us to understand all of those settings and be able to give recommendations to you. But something else I learned about is the pipeline that delivers the physical resources to the virtual environment. You also need to look at that trunk and make sure that's not your bottleneck. To be able to adequately monitor all of that and make sure that you don't have any bottlenecks can be really difficult. And what we're hoping to achieve for this year is maybe a new solid practice that would essentially advise you or teach you how to monitor all of those virtual resources from the one end all the way to the other end, in which case you can keep your system running smoothly, so when you have a problem, you don't have to run to a physical environment just to rule that part of it out. So that's kind of the direction we're heading in. I don't know the answer to that. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's been what we've done. I don't know what the official word is, but it has always been, for the testing environments, we've always done it. Our customers have always done it. If you're not using it for a production environment, we've always considered it fine. But I guess I'll have my legal hat on to say that, yeah, our EULA says that, no problem. Go ahead and do it. I don't know from that standpoint. So that'd have to be something that you'd have to seek maybe an answer on outside of this forum. Maybe, again, any of these questions you can initiate through your reseller, and they can always push it up to SolidWorks to get a definitive answer on that. But I'm not worried about it if you're not. Go ahead.
On your global set, you don't have that circle of all those different things you talk about, the tech support part, the documentation, and communication. Based on what you're reading back from the user community, is that prevalent? Everybody has that stuff, or is that not done a lot? Or?
If it wasn't evident, really wasn't sure what I was doing in that slide, we can ask Neil. Why don't you come on up, Neil, and we can hear your amazing accent.
Is it for people to have all their documentation in place and have a lot of that done? Is it something that you're putting that slide up there because you're not seeing people are doing it, or you're reminding people to do it, or how do you guys do it?
Switch on the top.
Yeah, we're saying you should be doing it, essentially. We have, as Bill said in the presentation, we have examples of people doing that, some pretty big companies, that kind of stuff, and they're doing all that from the off. And in the example Bill gave, they have 2,000 calls, 200 go to the VAR, 20 come to us. That's a really good example of one that's set up well. The problem is that most companies don't have that very well set up. And the smaller the companies get, the less likely it is that they have it. What we're saying is that you don't have to necessarily go to the extremes that particularly large company does, but it's a good idea to have some kind of process in place to capture the knowledge, keep it internal, be able to advise each other, be able to search your own intranet for the examples so that you don't have to keep asking the same questions. either of your VAR of yourselves or back to us, SolidWorks.
So what are you seeing on how's the effect of that globally? Is it more or less prevalent in a global rollout versus a local rollout?
It tends to be more prevalent in an example where the company's spread around, certainly, yeah, where they're more globally distributed rather than just one company site. But the process is just as relevant, in my view.
I know that I have a task with one of my customers right now to gather up the service requests that are going from their remote locations to their remote resellers. They have several resellers around the world, and everything is supposed to be channeled through their corporate headquarters to their internal IT help desk. The issues that are not are getting lost. They're not being tracked, so they can't tell if there are maybe some training issues that they need to have in these other locations, or how well they're getting service in these other locations, because they have no idea what's going on. So I'm going to help them coordinate that effort by having those resellers provide some reports back of what's happening, maybe on a monthly basis, that we can compile back into their internal help desk. So that's an example of a huge company that's not doing that and needs to. Go ahead. Ooh, it's smaller than you would think. Does anybody know, like, maybe the rough estimate? I mean, our sweet point is a pretty small rollout, maybe even less than 25 seats. The question was how big is our average enterprise PDM implementations?
I can't tell you definitively what our average is. It is, as Bill mentioned, I don't know, it's smaller. We have a lot of smaller companies who have implemented EPDM and run it very successfully. But we have quite a few accounts who are well up over the 700. One actually I spoke to this morning has 1,300 people running EPDM. So it runs a pretty big gamut, and it's only getting bigger. We see it more and more companies taking EPDM out, not just in CAD, but it's spilling out into the rest of their departments. It's steadily increasing.
Good. Well, that's...
Yeah.
Aha.
You know the answer?
No, I don't.
Well,
I was going to make something up.
Okay. Actually, there was the first release this year, and the product definition and product management do have some plan to have a kind of bulk loader, so that you will be able to gather your log, and then one machine that is maybe connected to the internet will be able to bulk load it on our server. At all. All right. Yeah, sorry, then.
Well, we use some of our own internal tools to read that data that comes in and decipher it and build those reports. So most of it, no, we won't be able to do on site. There are companies, these guys have done it, that prior to the tool coming out have done some of their own work to analyze that data and build up their own reports. So you may have to take that approach if you're not able to do that. Another thing you might want to look at is look at the content of the data being sent to us. Look at that content and say, is this something that we actually can send out? When you look at it, you may find that it's not. Right. It could take, to get something, because I know for sure some of it will never be able to run on your site. And if you're going to, for us to develop something that would be a trimmed down version, is going to take years to do. It may not be something that we would ever even be able to provide. And even writing your own tools could take a long time to sort out as well. So it might be worth at least initiating the conversation internally. Or again, look to see what you could have done either through your reseller or through a service partner to take that data and extract some of the information out. Because you know, a lot of it is in there. You could do something with it with somebody who simply knows how to read that output data text file, how to read that and compile it into something useful.
Is there an explicit list of what SolidWorks sent out in that process? Because even getting it approved requires explicit information, and I don't see any of that available.
Yeah, no, it's other than just looking at the content. Yeah,
Then
could we do that?
that be presented? Because the tool, anybody, any company doing any sort of military contract, which is a whole lot of us.
Right.
Right. I can't tell you that it doesn't, you know, it doesn't send out any information that's relative to the product geometry itself. You know, we understand what the system was doing. We know what some of the system configurations. We understand that, but to my knowledge, it doesn't really have anything about the part itself that's sent in. If it errors, if it's crashed, we understand. We get some call stacks to explain where in the code it crashed, but that doesn't tell us anything about the geometry that you were creating, aside from maybe the command you happen to be using at that time in the event. But we don't know whether it was a block, a circle, or what it was.
And we do know, like, we know file names and file paths, right?
Yeah.
So that could be a concern. I mean, you may have, you know, if you have a folder structure that says, you know, top secret, you know, robots that can build structures autonomously, if that's built into your file names or folder structures, that would go. So, I mean, it could be a concern. And I understand what you're saying, and
Right.
maybe we do have something like that even in a specification that we could make customer facing in terms of what it grabs. So that'd be a great question to ask too this afternoon in the CAD admin dashboard session.
Yeah, actually, we do have some companies that are working on defense, and one of their concern was the username and machine name, because basically what we retrieve is the SolidWorks log file. So they basically have a tool to change the username and machine name, and that's more or less it. Regarding the file name, it's part of the second log, and we do not receive them.
Oh, we don't.
We don't.
Okay.
So the concern for companies that are working on defense are username and machine name. I don't know if it could be a concern for you guys, but for them, it was the case. And it was the only thing. And they were able to get the approval from the security department just by removing username and machine name.
Okay.
You can get, if you type in your Windows Explorer, %appdata%, and you will be able to browse to SolidWorks, and then you've got the SolidWorks log that is basically sent to our server, so that you can check what's in there.
I think Bill mentioned this too. I mean, I think there's it's a valid question to ask what we send, and maybe that's something that we can work to get a solution published on, just so it's documented. These are essentially the bits of information that we're going to capture when that information comes in. Like I said, you can look at the log file. We're not trying to hide it, but certainly there's no reason I don't think we couldn't publish, what those strings are.
Right. Any other questions? All right, for everybody that stuck around till the very, very end, thanks. Appreciate you taking the time.